Okay then, so this is the autumn map, the one that you'll be most familiar with, and it is the map that has the least number of forests, 7 in total. The numbers here are just to indicate uh, the position of each forest. As you see, the river does not separate forests, so that is one forest, that is one forest, etc. So 7 in total. There are, as with every map, there are 22 building slots, 4 of which are covered in ruin markers, which may or may not become available throughout the game. So the ruins are marked where they are positioned. Every map has them in different positions. The frequency of building slots in clearings also changes with each map. So on this map, on the autumn map, there are 3 clearings that have only 1 building slot, like this. There are 8 clearings that have 2 building slots, like this. And there is 1 building slot that has 3 building slots, indicated here. Obviously, one of them is a ruin. I think that's probably all the important information about this map. Oh, other than, of course, this is the map that has all the suits already designated on the map. They can obviously be changed, like you can use the clearing markers, but obviously it's nice the fact that the color of the trees in each clearing match the color of that suit. So I like that aesthetic touch, and that's why I normally just like to leave the clearings as they are. Obviously, it's designed to be balanced as well. But yeah, there's no reason why you can't change. But that's the only map where they are definitely set out. Okay. So this is the winter map. And it's the reverse of the autumn map, so that's sort of one piece of cardboard. So I think a few of you might have played on this a few times. So it has 8 forests, so 8 in total. This river, I think it's called the Raging River in the rulebook. It does divide forests, as you can see. These are 2 different forests. These are 2 different forests. The forests are only important and pertinent for the Vagabond and for the Keepers in Iron, since they interact with the forest. All other factions, the forests, all they interact with are clearings, and they use the paths. Obviously, some used rivers to travel on, and that's a possibility if you can craft that, if you're using the Exile and Partisans deck as well. But yeah, it's just, I think it's important information to have about sort of how the forests are laid out and how they work. So so again, the clearings are not sort of marked with their suits. That has to be decided. And again, there's ways to you either do it randomly, or there's obviously systems where you can, like there's a website that offers help in terms of like advanced setup, including it can create a random yet balanced setup for clearings on any map you wish. So just, but there you go. So again, like before, 22 clearings in so 22 building slots in total. 4 of them are marked with the ruins. So again, these ones are in a slightly different position in terms of than in the autumn map. The so the distribution, the frequency of the building slots are, there are 4 clearings that have 1 building slot, 6 clearings that have 2 building slots, and there are 2 clearings that have 3 building slots. So all those numbers confused me there, so I'll just run through them again. There are 4 clearings that have 1 building slot, like that. 6 clearings that have 2 building slots, like that. And 2 clearings, these 2 here in the center, that have 3 building slots. Obviously, 2 of them are marked by ruins. Yeah. Okay, there you go. That's the winter map. I'm trying to think if there's anything else worth saying about it. From looking over all 4 of the maps, and looking at all this information I've sort of generated in terms of forests and how the clearings, how the building slots are distributed among the clearings, it is actually one of the most balanced. You'll probably see later with the lake and the mountain, which are the other 2 maps that were introduced later, which I've only just recently had added to my collection. This is probably the most interesting of the maps, I would probably say, and the most sort of balanced, perhaps. But again, that's more of an opinion, I guess. Okay, so this is the lake map. So, yep, let's just run through. So there are 9 forests in total. The one sort of difference on this map in terms of how the forests work, simply because with, I think, the Keepers in Iron particularly, possibly with the Vagabond as well, there's this whole idea about forests that are adjacent to each other. And obviously, as on any map, any forests that are divided by a path are adjacent to each other. But on this map, there's coastal clearings, which are all the clearings that have a harbour that are on the lake. And there are coastal forests, which are all the forests that run along the edge of the lake, divided by the clearings. So, on this map, forests that are adjacent include forests that are separated by a coastal clearing. So, Forest 5 is obviously adjacent to Forest 4 because there's a path, so that's kind of obvious, and that's always the case. But on the lake map, Forest 5 is also adjacent to Forest 6 because there's a coastal clearing separating them, and it's also adjacent to Forest 2 because there's a coastal clearing dividing it. So it's just the idea of, again, how forests work on each map and the number of forests and how they are distributed can obviously have an effect, if you're playing certain factions. Again, it's something which it's one possible it's something that changes on maps, so it's something I think worth pointing out and just being aware of. So yeah. So again, 22 clearings. 4 of them are marked with ruins. 3 of them are on coastal clearings, and 1 here. And the frequency of the building slots are, there are 6 clearings that only have 1 building slot, which is the most of any of the maps. This one has the most clearings with only one building slot, so it's quite brutal in terms of it forces all the factions to basically occupy clearings together, because we're going to, anyway, there are 2 clearings that have 2 building slots. That's one of this coastal one here, and this one up here. And there are 4 in total that have 3 building slots. All the ones with a ruin have all got 3 building slots. So again, on this map, the factions are all forced to compete over clearings, because once a building slot is taken, then unless you fight over it, you need to go somewhere else if you want to build. There is also, again, being a lake map, there is a thing called a landmark called the ferry, which should always be in play. The ferry always starts down here in the bottom right hand side of the lake. So that's where it always begins in the game. And just to give you an idea about what happens with the ferry, if a warrior is in the coastal clearing where the ferry is located, at any point, I might just have to double check the wording on these. Yep, once per turn. So again, at any point in that player's turn, pieces, use the term pieces, so the only pieces that usually travel are warriors. So I would say really it's a warrior, any number of warriors can travel on the ferry as a separate move outside of any other part of their turn, just as a separate move action, may travel with the ferry to another coastal clearing, anyone they choose. After you've done this, you also get to draw a card, as well as taking that move action. The ferry cannot be battled, cannot be removed from the game. It will always exist, and obviously can only then be, once it's at a certain coastal clearing, only pieces in that clearing may travel on it to another clearing. Of course, otters can travel freely because they are what's the term? Swimmers. I think that's the name given to them in the game. They are swimmers, so they can travel as if all of these linked by a path. They can travel freely as a move action. If you craft, I think it's riverboats as a crafting card in Exiles and Partisans, you also get to do that as well. But this is also available, so it's just another element to this board and to how this game plays. Yes. So again, it's the most, the fact that it only has half of the clearings only have one building slot. It's quite it's quite a challenging board, but I think it's cool, and I like the ferry element. I think that's an interesting addition. But so that's the lake map. Okay then, and last but by no means least is the mountain map. So this has the most forests, and and you'll notice that the board is quite dark. Obviously, the idea is it's supposed to evoke sort of a mountainous region. So there are kind of forests, but basically any area that is enclosed with paths and clearings is designated as a forest, regardless of whether there's actually any trees present on these sort of rocky areas. So yeah, 10 in total. Again, this river is just more like a babbling brook running through this mountainous region. So it does not divide forests. So 10 in total on this map. It has the most sort of individual forest areas. This map has two special features about it. The first is that you'll see that, as with any game, the paths are designated with these sort of white dots here. There are 6 extra paths, but they start the game as closed paths, which are shown with these there. So again, even though they're closed, they still divide forests, which is why there's just so many. So they are still regarded as 2 separate adjacent forests, even though there might be a marker to designate that there's a closed path. There's still 2 separate forests. The paths cannot be traversed until they have been opened, excavated, which can be done by any faction that has a piece in any clearing that kind of accesses the path. So they spend a card. Let me just check that as well. I believe you just spend a card. Yeah, so once per turn, in their daylight, so only during daylight, a player can spend a card to remove a closed path marker from the game permanently and score 1 victory point. To remove it, the player must have any faction pieces in either clearing linked by the closed path. So there are 6 in total. Start the game, they'll all be closed, and then as the game goes on, players may choose to spend cards and get points to open them up. And once it's open, that's them open for the rest of the game. And they become a new path between certain clearings. So I'm actually going to remove them all now, just to show you what it looks like if they are all 6 are removed. So yeah, so if all 6 are removed, this is what it looks like. A lot going on. It's a very, lots of different ways to travel around. So again, 22 building slots. 4 of them are marked by ruins, which are right here in the center of the game. Oh yes, I forgot to mention this, the tower, which is the other unique element to this. This is called, again, like with Fairy No Other One, this is called a landmark. It exists here in this clearing, the one that's marked with these towers here. It exists in this clearing and remains in that clearing, cannot be removed, cannot be battled. What it means is, at the end of a player's turn, once they've completed their evening, the end of a player's evening, if you rule this clearing with the tower, you gain an extra point. To indicate that, a little feature that I think is very cute is that if you know you rule it at any one point, you can place one of the warriors that exists in that clearing on the top of the tower. And that makes it very clear to remind you that at the end of your turn, as long as you continue to rule that clearing, at the end of your turn, you score that extra victory point. And again, so the rule of that clearing, well, obviously, like with any clearing, can change over time. So yeah, at the end of your turn you rule that clearing, you'll get an extra point. And so that is the tower. Building slots. So on this map, there are 4 clearings with 1 building slot. There are 5 clearings with 2 building slots, and there are 3 clearings with 3 building slots. Like with the winter map, that feels to me very balanced. It's a nice distribution. It's not kind of weighted towards any one particular distribution of clearings. It seems quite balanced. The fact that the game starts with only a certain number of parts and then they open up, so 6 more could become available, really makes this a really kind of interesting, slightly busy and sort of sometimes a bit kind of overwhelming kind of map, I feel. But again, all 4 of these maps can be enjoyed in different ways. They, again, just, I want to experience them all, see what they're all like. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else about this one that's important that I haven't mentioned. I don't think so. Yeah, okay. So that's our 4 different maps for your consideration.